My name is Madison. I've always been the quiet one. Not rebellious, not dramatic. Just overlooked. I didn't make waves. I didn't stir up trouble. I just existed. And in my family, existing was enough to be forgotten. When I was 12, my dad remarried. Teresa came along bringing with her 2 golden children, Ethan and Lauren. They were everything I wasn't, loud, flashy, the center of attention. And I was the one who quietly sat in the background, watching, as they stole all the spotlight. Every holiday, every birthday, they were the stars. Ethan's voice rang out, filled with laughter, as he showed off the newest tech gadget. Lauren smiled her perfect smile and opened up designer bags that made everyone stop and stare. And me? I was the one sitting at the edge of the couch, smiling, politely when I was supposed to, but feeling like a ghost. I'd watch them, watch my dad's proud smile as he showered them with praise. And I'd try to disappear even more, because it was easier that way. I learned that a long time ago. Don't ask for attention. Don't need anything. Don't expect to be seen. Christmas was always the hardest. The room would be filled with the sound of their laughter, their excitement, as they opened gifts. And me? Maybe a $10 candle, or a book I'd already read. It wasn't the presents. It wasn't the gifts I wanted. It was the feeling that, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I tried, I would never be the one who got that warmth, that love, those words. Dad didn't seem to notice. Teresa definitely didn't. Lauren? She was too, busy trying to be perfect to notice anyone else. And Ethan? He didn't care either. But I never complained. I never asked for more. I just sat there, year after year, trying to make myself as small as possible, trying to fade into the background, because I knew no one would miss me. It hurt, but that's what you do when you're the invisible daughter. You stay quiet. You stay out of the way. And eventually, you learn to disappear. And maybe that was the hardest part, learning that I was never going to be enough for them. Christmas was always the same. The same smell of turkey and cinnamon. The same cheerful music playing in the background. The same familiar faces. Except this time, I couldn't help but feel even more out of place. I sat quietly in the same spot I always did, curled up in the corner of the couch, watching as my family surrounded themselves with laughter and warmth. Ethan was showing off his new phone. Lauren was gushing over the designer bag she just unwrapped. Her eyes sparkled with that perfect smile of hers. And there I was, sitting quietly, pretending to care about the little $10 candle I had received. Again. It was never about the gift, really. It was about the silence. The way no one noticed me. Carl, my dad, was on cloud 9, glowing with pride over Ethan and Lauren. He was always proud of them. He always had been. And me? I was just the background noise, the daughter who stayed home on Christmas Eve, quietly staring at the lights on the tree while my family celebrated around me. I didn't expect anything different this year. Nothing had changed. But somehow, this Christmas felt worse. Maybe because I had been working so hard, building something of my own, and I had hoped that for once, someone, anyone, would notice. But it didn't happen. Not in the way I thought it would. Teresa, always the sharp one, made sure to voice her opinion in front of the table. "All Madison does is sit at home on her computer," she said, a laugh in her voice. "At least Lauren's doing real work. In retail. That's something." Ethan chuckled, like it was funny. Like it was okay to tear someone down just to make yourself feel better. And my dad? He didn't say a word. Not a single word. He just sat there, not looking at me, not defending me. I forced a smile. My teeth were gritted, but they didn't notice. Of course they didn't. I stayed quiet. I always did. It was easier that way. The less I spoke, the less they had to ignore me. But this time it felt different. Something in me was starting to snap. Something that had been holding me back all these years. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the weight of the quiet resentment building up inside me. But I had worked so damn hard, and no one had ever said, "We're proud of you." I stayed quiet as usual. But deep inside, the quiet rage was building. I was tired of being invisible, tired of being the joke. I just wanted someone to see me. Just once. But it was Christmas, and I didn't expect anything to change. I've always been the one to do things on my own. The one who stays up late, the one who works through the weekends, the one who doesn't ask for help. It's easier that way. Easier than waiting around for someone to notice. Easier than counting on people who wouldn't care. Easier than facing the reality that no one else would see my effort, my sacrifice, my dream. I had been working on my startup for months. No, for years. It wasn't just a business to me. It was the only thing I had built that truly belonged to me. No one could take it away. No one could belittle it. No one could ignore it. But they tried. Every late-night coding session, every long meeting, every email to potential partners, I did it alone. I was used to it. I didn't mind being the one who worked while everyone else slept. In the quiet of the night, when the house was still, I would sit at my desk, staring at the screen, my fingers typing away, pushing my idea further. It wasn't just a hobby. It wasn't just sitting at home on my computer, like Teresa liked to say. It was my future, and it was so hard, so damn hard. But when I looked at the numbers, when I saw the potential, I knew it was worth it. I had moments where I thought, maybe this will work. Maybe this will take off. Maybe one day people will see that I'm not just that girl who sits in the corner. I'll be more than that. But every time I thought that there was this voice inside me, the one I'd tried so hard to ignore, that whispered, "Who are you kidding? No one is going to care. They've never cared." I was used to being the one who was overlooked, the one who was pushed aside. No one in my family understood what it took to run a business. Carl didn't ask how things were going. Teresa didn't care. Lauren? She was too busy keeping up with her perfect life to even notice. But I wasn't doing it for them. I wasn't doing it for their approval. I was doing it for me. I was building something that no one could take away. And slowly, very slowly, it was starting to grow. I could feel it, the shift, the quiet victory, and maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. But every day, I still had to wake up and face that question. Will they ever see me? Will they ever notice? It didn't matter anymore. I didn't need their validation. I was building something that belonged to me. For the first time, I was building my own place in this world, even if it meant doing it alone. The house was full of warmth, the lights on the tree twinkling in the corner, the smell of roasted turkey lingering in the air. Everything was the same. Same Christmas music playing softly in the background. Same scene. Ethan laughing with his latest tech toy, Lauren flipping her hair as she talked about her recent promotion at retail, Carl, my dad, smiling proudly at his perfect family. And there I was, again, sitting quietly on the edge of the couch. I wasn't angry, not yet. I had learned long ago that it wasn't worth it. The silence, the distance, the way they ignored me, none of it mattered anymore. Not really. I had my work. I had my business. And I could live without their attention, without their approval. Or at least I convinced myself I could. But tonight felt different. I had been pushing myself so hard lately, My startup was on the verge of something big, something that could change everything. I had a few investors looking at my product, a few partnerships on the table. I could feel the momentum building. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was the fact that I was tired of being small, tired of being nothing in this house. Or maybe it was the quiet resentment I had swallowed for years, just trying to stay out of the way. It was right in the middle of all the cheer, when Teresa had made her usual comment about how all I do is sit on my computer all day, when the doorbell rang. I didn't think much of it. It was probably just another person delivering a Christmas card or a package for someone else. But when the door opened, everyone's attention snapped to the man standing there in the doorway. He was sharply dressed, wearing a tailored suit, standing tall with an air of confidence. The security team hovered behind him. He didn't seem like anyone ordinary. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "I'm looking for Madison Blake." For a moment, no one spoke. Everyone stared. I stood, slowly, not sure what was happening. The room had gone silent. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Lauren froze, her perfect smile fading into confusion. My dad, Carl, looked at me, his face twisted in confusion. "Mr. Roth?" I said, my voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. He smiled warmly, extending his hand to me. "Yes, Ms. Blake. I'm Mr. Roth. I just came to personally deliver the finalized documents for the $12 million deal we just signed with your company." The room went still. I could feel the eyes of my family on me. Carl's jaw dropped. Teresa's face went pale. Lauren's smile, the one she always wore so proudly, slipped as she processed the words. I took the folder from Mr. Roth's hand, nodding at him. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. I glanced at my family, standing there in shock. The same family who had dismissed me for years, who had never bothered to see me. And then, with a steady voice, I said, the FAI, words that I had never dared say before. "You always said I was nothing." Funny, the world disagrees. The silence in the room was deafening. My words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt seen. I didn't need to explain further. The message had already landed. I was done being invisible. For a long moment, no one moved. The house felt like it had frozen in time. Mr. Roth stood there, still holding his briefcase, a quiet confidence in his posture. I wasn't sure if he realized the weight of what had just happened, how his presence had shifted everything in this room, how the air felt thick with a tension none of us had ever known. Carl's face was pale. He looked like he didn't know whether to apologize or be angry, but he didn't speak. He didn't say a word. And maybe that was the most painful part of it all. He didn't even bother to defend me. Not when Teresa had mocked my work, not when Ethan laughed at me, and certainly not when I was standing in front of them, finally claiming a piece of myself that they had long denied. Teresa's wine glass trembled in her hand. She tried to steady. It but failed, and it slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. The noise echoed in the silence, but no one spoke. No one moved. Lauren was the first to find her voice, though it was strained. "Wait. You?" she asked, looking from me to Mr. Roth, her voice shaking slightly, a mix of confusion and disbelief. I nodded. "Yeah, Lauren. Me." Mr. Roth's smile widened, though he seemed unaware of the storm unfolding around him. "It's an honor to work with Madison. We're very excited about the partnership moving forward. I'll let you all get back to your evening." With that, he turned to leave, but not before he offered me a parting glance that was both kind and respectful. I looked at my family. My family. My blood. Carl was still standing there, his mouth open, unsure of what to say. He looked at me, but his gaze wasn't the same as before. It wasn't filled with pride. It wasn't filled with anything but confusion. He had no idea who I had become. Teresa stood rigid, a frozen smile on her face, the reality sinking in. She had never respected me. She had never even tried to understand me. To her, I was always just the quiet girl who sat on the sidelines while Ethan and Lauren got all the attention. Ethan? He just blinked, his smirk faltering. He couldn't hide the shock in his eyes, but he didn't speak. He didn't know what to say, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing him try to explain himself. Lauren's smile had completely faded now, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Maybe guilt, maybe envy, maybe a mix of both. But she didn't speak either. The silence was suffocating. It stretched on for what felt like hours, but it was only a few seconds. Finally, I broke the stillness, the words slipping out before I could stop them. You always said I was nothing. You said I'd never be anything. But the world disagrees, doesn't it? There it was. The quiet truth I had been hiding for so long. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. I had built something that was mine. And if they couldn't see it, if they couldn't accept it, then that was on them. Not me. I turned to walk away, the folder in my hand a symbol of everything they had overlooked. Everything I had achieved in silence. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to wait for their apology. Because for the first time, I realized that I didn't need them at all. I walked away from the living room, the sound of my footsteps, sharp in the silence that followed me. My heart was racing, but there was no fear in me, only something that felt stronger. Relief, maybe. Or perhaps it was the quiet, steady confidence that had finally come to rest inside me. I had spent so many years shrinking in their shadow, always apologizing for taking up space, always waiting for someone to acknowledge my worth. But now, I was done waiting. As I made my way to the kitchen, I could still feel their eyes on me. Carl, Teresa, Ethan, Lauren, all of them, still frozen in that moment. But something had shifted. It was subtle at first, a quiet crack in the facade they'd built around themselves. I could feel it in the way Carl hadn't even tried to defend me, the way Teresa's smile had faltered, the way Ethan and Lauren were left speechless. For the first time in forever, the power dynamic had tilted. I reached the kitchen and leaned against the counter, the folder still clutched tightly in my hand. I could hear the murmurs from the living room, but I didn't move. I didn't need to. The moment had passed, and in its place was something new. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the one who sat quietly, hoping to be seen. No, I was the one who had walked into that room and turned the whole thing upside down. I was the one who had, in a single sentence, shattered the illusion that I didn't matter. The realization hit me in waves. I had spent my whole life trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less of a burden. And for what? To earn the love of people who had never cared enough to look closely at who I was? To chase the approval of people who would never see the value in my silence, my hard work, my quiet resilience? I wasn't going to do that anymore. I didn't need to prove myself to them. I didn't need to chase their attention or beg for their validation. I had already achieved something they couldn't even begin to understand, and maybe that's what hurt them the most. I looked at the folder in my hand, the deal that had taken me months of sleepless nights to finalize. $12 million. It was a victory, not just for my business, but for me. I felt it, deep in my chest, a surge of power I hadn't known I had until that moment. I was done shrinking. Done being the invisible daughter. I had built something that would stand on its own, something that didn't require anyone's approval to make it real. And as I stood there in the quiet of the kitchen, I realized something else. My worth wasn't tied to their acceptance. It never had been. I had always been enough. The silence at the table stretched on long after Mr. Roth left, the weight of my words hanging in the air, settling like dust. My family didn't know what to do with themselves. They couldn't. They had never seen me like this before, strong, unapologetic, owning my place, and it terrified them. I could hear Carl's voice from the other room, low and uncertain. Madison. I didn't know. I didn't move. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready for the apology I knew wasn't coming. Not the real one. Not the one that would have mattered. Teresa's voice followed sharper than usual. You should have told us. All this time we thought you were just, well, a quiet little thing. And there it was. The thinly veiled attempt at control. The justification for their neglect. It was easier for them to pretend I wasn't working so hard. Easier for them to dismiss my dreams as insignificant because it made their lives more comfortable. If they didn't have to see me striving, if they didn't have to acknowledge that I was more than the quiet daughter they ignored, then everything stayed in place. Everything stayed easy. But I wasn't easy anymore. I took a deep breath, my fingers still gripping the edges of the folder. I could feel the weight of the contract, of everything that had led me here, of the sacrifices, the late nights, the moments of doubt that I had buried deep inside. The world had finally noticed me, and now it was time for me to notice myself. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. But in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Even if they never acknowledged my worth, I had learned to see it. I had finally learned to see myself. The anger that had built up over the years, the hurt that had simmered just beneath the surface, didn't need to bubble over anymore. I didn't have to fight for their love. I didn't have to earn a seat at the table. I had already built my own. I moved toward the living room, where Carl and Teresa were still sitting, the atmosphere tense with awkwardness. I didn't expect an apology, and I didn't need one. You always said I was nothing, I said again, this time to Carl, my voice quieter, but no less steady. Funny, isn't it? The world disagrees. Carl looked at me then, really looked at me. I saw the realization in his eyes. I saw the regret, too. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. I wasn't the little girl he had overlooked. I wasn't the quiet daughter who sat in the corner. I was a woman who had built something for herself. I was a woman who had learned her worth, not from them, but from the quiet resilience I had carried all along. I turned and walked away, not waiting for their words, not needing anything else. The door closed behind me, and for the first time in my life, I knew I didn't have to stay. I didn't have to beg for their approval. I didn't have to beg for their love. I had already given myself what I needed. The next few days passed in, a blur. I didn't feel the weight of the holiday anymore. I wasn't caught up in the decorations or the holiday cards or the forced cheer. What had been a Christmas of silence and rejection had turned into something much bigger. Something that had changed everything. I spent the days alone, reflecting. It was like a fog had lifted. I didn't need to wait for my family to acknowledge me anymore. I didn't need to fight for a place in a life that wasn't really mine. I had been building my own world all along, brick by brick, and the foundation was strong. And yet, I found myself checking my phone more often than I usually did. Part of me still wanted them to reach out, to acknowledge what had happened. But then I remembered. I wasn't waiting for them anymore. I wasn't going to let the need for their approval take up space in my heart. The years of longing had faded into the background, replaced by a quiet, sure strength. Carl hadn't called. Teresa hadn't apologized. Ethan and Lauren hadn't said a word, and it was fine. I realized that they had no power over me anymore. No more comments, no more condescension, no more being the invisible one in the room. I had started something of my own. I had made a name for myself, and the world could see that. I had done it without their help, without their praise, and that was enough. As the days went by, I focused on my company. There was work to do, things to refine, deals to solidify. I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. But it wasn't just about business anymore. It was about me. It was about my own growth, my own independence, my own future. And for the first time, I felt like I was walking in the direction I was meant to go. On the 4th day after Christmas, as I sat at my desk, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't expect anyone, and I certainly didn't expect it to be my father. I stood up slowly, surprised by the unexpected visit. When I opened the door, Carl stood there, hands in his pockets, his face worn with something like regret. "Madison," he began, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. This wasn't what I had imagined. This wasn't the apology I had expected. But it didn't matter. I had already given myself what I needed. I wasn't desperate for it anymore. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm sorry, Madison. I've always been proud of you, but I didn't know how to show it. I guess I didn't realize what you were really doing all these years. I should have been there for you." The words were slow, hesitant, but they were real. I listened, but I didn't feel the same ache I had before. It wasn't about forgiving him. It wasn't about fixing things. It was about me and the space I had created for myself that didn't rely on him. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, my voice steady. "But I've already forgiven you. I've forgiven myself too. I don't need your validation anymore. I've learned to see my worth. I don't need you to tell me that anymore." Carl's face softened, the tension in his shoulders easing as he nodded. "I understand. And I'm proud of you, Madison. More than you'll ever know." And that was it. I didn't need a grand gesture. I didn't need him to take back everything. What mattered was that I had learned to stand on my own. I had learned that I didn't need anyone else's approval to move forward. "Thank you, Dad," I said quietly. "But I'm going to be okay. I'm already okay." And with that, he left. Days passed. The world continued spinning around me, and somehow, I felt more in control of my own life than I ever had before. It wasn't about the money, or the deals, or the business anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had been growing quietly inside me without anyone noticing. The truth was, I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. Not to Carl, not to Teresa, not to anyone in that house. I had already done it. I had built something real, something that stood on its own. And it wasn't just a business or a deal. It was me. It was my resilience, my quiet strength, and my refusal to be invisible anymore. I didn't care that Carl hadn't been there for me before. I didn't care that Teresa had never seen me. I had learned to see myself. And the more I focused on that, the more I realized that this was my life, my future. I could fill it with the things I wanted. I could make it whatever I wanted, and no one could take that away from me. At the office, things were moving at full speed. There were new partnerships, new opportunities. The phone rang off, the hook with calls from investors, from clients, from people who believed in what I had built. Every day felt like a new step forward. But it wasn't just about success. It wasn't just about the accolades or the praise. It was about the quiet moments, those small victories that no one could see but me. I had learned to be my own source of validation. That's when it hit me. I was free, no longer weighed down by the need to be seen or heard by my family, no longer seeking approval from anyone who wasn't willing to give it to me. I had built my own place in the world, one that didn't depend on their opinions or expectations. I found myself laughing more, smiling more. I took joy in the little things, like my morning coffee, or the way the sun hit the office windows in the early hours of the day. For the first time in a long time, I was truly present, fully, completely present, in my own life. And then, out of the blue, I got a message from Lauren. It was brief, just a few lines, but it stopped me in my tracks. Madison, I wanted to reach out. I know things have been complicated, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I read the message a few times, unsure of what to make of it. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't some kind of healing moment. But it was something I had never expected to hear from her. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't about needing her validation either. It wasn't about getting an apology. It was about knowing I was enough, with or without it. I smiled, set my phone down, and took a deep breath. This was the beginning of something new. Not just for my business, but for me. I was writing the story, now. Not anyone else. Not Carl. Not Teresa. Not Lauren. Just me. And that was enough. The world felt different now. Quieter in a way. As if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't searching for anything anymore. Not validation. Not acceptance. Not a seat at the table. I had carved my own path. Built my own future. And no one could take that away from me. Not Teresa. Not Carl. Not anyone. I woke up every morning feeling like I had finally found my rhythm. My office was no longer just a place where I worked. It was where I created, where I made decisions that mattered, where I saw my ideas come to life. It wasn't always easy. There were long days, sleepless nights, moments of doubt that crept in, but each time I faced them, I remembered what I had learned. I didn't need anyone to believe in me but myself. Every deal I signed, every milestone I reached, wasn't just a victory for my business. It was a victory for me. For the quiet girl who had spent years trying, to prove she was more than just the background noise in a family that never saw her. For the woman who had finally stopped shrinking, who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. And then one day, as I sat at my desk reviewing some contracts, I got another message. It was from Carl. It was brief, just like Lauren's. But it was enough to make me pause. Madison, I've been thinking about everything. I'm proud of you. I always have been. I just didn't know how to show it. I stared at the message for a long time, the words hitting me in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't the apology I had once craved. It wasn't the perfect reconciliation, but it was something. It was enough. It was a step. And that was all I needed. I put my phone down and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. But it was nice to know they saw me. Finally. And in the end, I realized that was the true gift. The moment I had unwrapped. Not just on Christmas, but in everything I had worked for. The moment I finally saw myself. I wasn't just the invisible daughter anymore. I was Madison Blake, the woman who had built something from nothing. The woman who had taken her place in the world, and that was a gift I could give myself.